tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. All right, so last week was Fetters part 1. Fetters, the Sangyojana. These are 10 restrictive or constrictive qualities in the heart. They're really elaborations of the great poisons or defilements, greed, hatred, and delusion. It includes several of the list of the hindrances, particularly sense desire and aversion, restlessness at the end. Restlessness is the very last one to go, fetter number 10. Only fully released with the attainment of full liberation, arahantship. But we're right at the beginning of the list, and we've just talked about the very first fetter in the list, which is self-view or personality view, sakkāyadiṭṭhi. And so the little review of that really is that it has its place as first in the list, partly because this is one of the first insights to open very often for folks, as the heart has either a gradual blossoming or a flash of seeing more clearly how the world around us and through us works. We see that everything arises and passes based in conditions. We see impermanence, so how everything is changing based in conditions again. And really how everything that we think of as a thing, as a solid entity, whether it's, an immaterial entity like a piece of furniture or a rock or a built thing in the environment, or it's a piece of natural object like a plant or an animal, or ourselves as an animal and a person, or even a thing like a thought or a concept, a word, an idea, that all of these things, essentially anything that gets a name, whether it's table or chair or friend or lover or tree or grass or grasshopper or microbe or human or water or star or God or justice or love or all of these things where you can name it, and the name coheres a kind of identity, right? Plato would say that there's a kind of form or a sort of transcendent idea that is what we are pointing to when we name something in this way. We notice through practice that all of these things are actually processes, right? That nothing actually, it just appears as a thing, persists as that thing, and then disappears as that thing. Even something that seems very solid, like a rock, that seems to be the same for a very long time, of course, is not the same forever, right? It's just evidence of a very slow process of, minerals coming together and solidifying and drying out and mud packing and pressure and eventually cracking and becoming sand and silt and everything is always somewhere in a process of churning elements. And so with impermanence and conditionality and flux and process, really the main thing that we see when the chitta, the heart mind, is still enough, but also perceptive enough, curious enough, energized enough to see clearly, the result of this as an insight, as an uprooting of an ancient error and painful error in the heart, is the uprooting of this personality view of sakkāyadiṭṭhi. Because personality view is the view, the deep belief orientation framework that the thing that we are is a stable thing, right? Is that we are a thing, not a process. And I know you're a process, right? We're like, yeah, I was young, I'm older, I'm getting older, I see people die, I get sick. Like, we know this, but part of what we were looking at last time and that you can feel into is that the thing I call the self, that manifests as personality, which is why both words are used. I know it's a process, but there's also a really deep, pervasive sense that there's something that's consistent that runs through it, some thread of this is me that runs through the whole thing. And around that steady thread, everything changes, right? You know, and um, and various traditions call this thread that runs through the various changes, that's the form, right? That's the Platonic idea. That's you, and that gets called the soul very often. Soul is probably the best translation of the Pali term atta and the Sanskrit word atman, where in Pali, atta is usually often translated as self, but I would translate it as soul. And so then anatta, the a negation to atta, becomes not soul. The English term soulless isn't very good because we just kind of, it has a pejorative in English, but lacking intrinsic essence is something like a precise translation, awkward but accurate. Not stable at its core. And again, that's not an insult. That's just a description of a process, that there's nothing in the process that is separate from the process of change, right? There's no thing standing outside the process of the elements of existence moving in their constant play. So when we see this, sakkāyadiṭṭhi ruptures. The deep belief that there's a stability underneath all of the flux is pulled up. And you may well have had a flash of this, right? It's not something that is that distant. The flash of it is when you get this hit that everything is in motion, that you are evolving, that everything around you is evolving, and that all of it is evolving together in this ceaseless churn. You can get a hit of this if you're not prepared for it, or not stable in other ways in your life. It can be a serious, emotional kind of whoa moment. It can lead to some freak out. It can be existential. It can also be very ordinary and like, oh yeah, right, that's totally how it is. But very often it comes with some punch, to be honest, because the because the thing that it's uprooting is very deeply rooted. So even if you're like, woohoo, I got this enormous taproot, out of my garden bed, you still had to tug pretty hard and dig pretty deep. And there's a kind of a whoa kind of sense when it comes out. So sakkāyadiṭṭhi is the first kind of breakthrough traditionally. And then the second, that really, the second and third are in a way they're just add-ons to the first. The first one is really the breakthrough to stream entry. The second one is also the fifth hindrance. So we translate it as doubt or skeptical doubt. The Pali is vicikicca or vicikicca. And traditionally, it's doubt in the practice or doubt in the Dhamma. So doubt in the path. And, it's uprooted at this point because whatever idea you've had over all the years of your practice that you weren't getting anywhere, and I don't know if you've ever had that thought, but I have, wow, spending a lot of effort here, sitting still or whatever, and, same old as far as I can tell, right? Like that thought is common for many folks. But, when you have uh, an opening to something like sakkāyadiṭṭhi, the the thing that makes it really, stream entry and not just a momentary, you know, interesting existential thought you had walking on a windswept cliff over the fog, who am I really, you know? But the thing that makes it really cut through and last, that you've really entered the stream, is that there is no doubt in your heart, mind, that the practice you've done has worked. It doesn't, there's no doubt. There's no sense of like, I'm kind of a failure at practice, but I had this weird random insight one day. Maybe it's not worth anything. Like, no, that's not stream entry. Stream entry traditionally is like you you know something and you know it. And when you know it, there's just no doubt in your mind of how you got there. So it's not just that there's no doubt that you had the insight. Aha, I've had the insight into sakkāyadiṭṭhi. It's more like, oh, this practice I've been doing, it works. It works. The teachings, they're true. They're accurate. They're pragmatic. They have led me to this. Even if, even if you were like lots of people in the suttas, they open their Dharma eye, to stream entry like they just met the Buddha 10 minutes before and he's giving them a rip-roaring Dharma talk and their Dharma eye opens. And they haven't sat a minute of meditation in their lives, but the Buddha's like, Sila, Dana, the Four Noble Truths, and they're like, whoa, boom, they're done. That's what happens to Anya Kondanya, right? Who has been practicing. He's one of the Buddha's ascetic friends, but he hasn't been practicing under the Buddha's direction. And the Buddha already has discovered that the practice that Kondanya and his friends are doing doesn't work. So Kondanya's been doing this thing that doesn't work for 6 years, and plus whatever he did before that, or however long he's been doing it. The Buddha has been doing it for 6 years. So for some portion of that, Kondanya and the other four are with him. They're doing a thing that doesn't work. Then the Buddha goes off on his own, finds the way, comes to see them and says, I figured out what works. He doesn't teach them to meditate. He doesn't say anything about doctrine. He says, I figured out the middle way between sensual indulgence and bodily mortification. And the middle way is the Four Noble Truths, right? Pain, grasping, cessation, and the path. And the path is the Eightfold Path. While he's saying this, so all he's saying is, here's what suffering is and the reason why we're suffering. That's the teaching that he gives. Noble Truths. And then Kondanya says, everything is impermanent. So in the middle of just being told that there is pain and a cause of pain, and therefore the possibility of uprooting the cause and ending the pain, Kondanya sees impermanence. He gets the teaching that the Buddha is not even giving and opens his Dharma eye. And it's the seeing of impermanence that opens his Dharma eye. Impermanence implies sakkāyadiṭṭhi. Because if you see that everything is impermanent, duh, that means you too. And so you're like, oh yeah, it all goes. And the Buddha says, Kondanya sees. He sees it. Kondanya knows. He knows. Anya Kondanya, the one who knows. And so that's Kondanya's opening of the Dharma eye. And that's stream entry. So stream entry can happen not necessarily as a result of lots of practice. It can happen quickly, but it always happens when the Dharma is touched fully. So when Kondanya hears the Noble Truths, he has enough grounding in discipline, like his heart is ready to hear it, basically, that his eye opens right away. And so going along with that, right, he sees impermanence, uproots sakkāyadiṭṭhi, and, instantly has faith in the path, basically. He's been struggling in the woods for years doing painful stuff. here comes his friend and says, here's why you're suffering. And he's like, and suddenly, he's entered the stream. And that's it. That's it. He's there. And so uprooting the second fetter of doubt is really just the natural consequence of seeing that the path actually works. So for us who are not perhaps as talented as Anya Kondanya, not as quick off the mark as Anya Kondanya, we practice, we deal with our emotions, we learn some concentration, we gather the energies of the mind, we deal with the body, we try to be as healthy as we can. We learn to care for each other, keeping the precepts, we learn to be more generous. We're practicing the path. And doubt afflicts everyone, essentially, that I know of on the path. It's so deep in the way that this hindrance like worms its way into the heart, like the broken off tip of a Morgul blade, and is trying to kill you, and you have to get it out of there. I wrote in the newsletter last week about Frodo and Gollum, so I think we're going to be back to Lord of the Rings references for the next little while. We need to have moments where we know for ourselves very clearly that our practice is working. Right? We don't have to have broken through sakkāyadiṭṭhi and be like, I am fully done with, the illusion of self. But in the way that these things are also gradual, there's, because doubt, vicikicca, it's not just the second fetter, it's also this hindrance that we deal with all the time in the ordinary set of hindrances, that we again and again see this insidious narrative sneak into the heart. Doubt is really a narrative hindrance, right? It's a message. It's not even so much an emotion. I think the emotion behind it can be a number of things. There can be fear, there can be anxiety, there can be frustration or anger. But the story is a story that's some variation of, I'm not going to make it. And I'm not going to make it to freedom or to well-being because the path is not, going to take me there. Like it's not a good path, or the path isn't well explained, or the teacher isn't explaining it well enough, or it's been too long since the Buddha and no one can do it anymore, or whatever story you've got about the failings of the path. Or it's the failings of myself. Like, okay, the path is good, but I can't do it. Most of us, this is what we do. I'm like, okay, the Dharma is great, but I suck. I can't really do it, or I've seen people do both. Like, oh, in these fallen times, not only is the Dharma corrupted and colonized and watered down, but I can't even do it anyway. Like I can't even concentrate, even in this minimal way. And so we combine doubt in the external, doubt in the path, or doubt in myself. You could say, I think I'm pretty strong and I'm trying my damnedest, and that I've been given good teachings, but the conditions around me are not such that practice is supported, And part of what's sneaky about doubt, of course, is that in various ways, all of those things can be true, right? It is true that it's 2,600 years since the Buddha's death. And, the Dharma has survived, 2.5 millennia of wars and translation problems and cataclysms and cultural shift and, any number of things. And then the British show up, and it's more colonialism and more war and more, translation and, and now I'm like, I was having a conversation with a friend at Spirit Rock today about how a friend who works at one of the major meditation apps out there, and she said, I'm actually the last mindfulness practitioner on staff because everyone there is now just tech people who only believe in, and I was like, let me guess, like it's all sleep and productivity now. No one even really cares about mindfulness. And she was like, it's true. The whole app has become sleep and productivity hacks, and DJ sets. And, it's like, and the meditations are really like abundance meditations to like focus your mind so that you can code faster. I don't know, you know? Um, and she's like, I don't even know what I'm doing there, you know, but I'm trying to hold on. Um, and so it is true that the Dharma is wildly changed. Um, it's not necessarily true that it's watered down, but that depends where you're getting it, right? Like it is on the apps, on some of the apps. It's not in other places. And even on other apps, it's not, you know? We're in the middle of the most radical democratization of good translations of the canon that has ever existed in history. And the fact that you can read the entire Pali Canon in solid translations in about 20 languages, meaning that almost anyone on the planet with an internet connection who speaks one of the 20 most common languages on the planet, which is a lot of people, can read the whole damn thing, which has never been true before, you know? And in good translations and in, like well taught by well trained heartfelt teachers. Like, so it's not anything doubt comes up with, you can come up with an amicus brief in defense of the opposition. So sometimes you have to do this. You have to just argue yourself down. You're like, the Dharma has gone to hell, and you're like, it has not, and you can have that argument. um, but you can do this with any of the levels of doubt. So if you're doubting the path, you can say, oh, it's the path has been watered down, or or you could fall in with some fringe of the Dharma world that doesn't reject the path, maybe that even loves the path, but has decided that a certain interpretation of it is the only thing that's correct. So you could fall in with the fundamentalist Theravadins, like if you go to a Goenka retreat, and they'll say any other practice is not the true practice, or you could fall in with, the like secular atheists, the secular Buddhist people, or Stephen Batchelor and his brand of intellectual, atheism. You could fall in with, I'm not going to start insulting people because I respect all these people, but um, there's names that I don't, and I haven't named them yet, and I won't. But so it's true, right, that there's path that's not worthy of your full faith and trust. And so it does take discernment, right? Like your doubt could come up and say, oh, I think I'm in a bywater of the true Dharma that's not actually helpful. And of course, in a modern age where so many traditions have fallen prey to greed and corruption and sexual scandal and power scandal, um, you might not be incorrect, right? I've been in multiple toxic lineages where I would have the doubt, is this actually a path that leads to well-being? And, in the context of sitting in meditation, it was the hindrance of doubt. But in the discernment of being a Sangha member in a toxic community, it was totally correct, actually. Right? And that's one thing about the hindrances that I think can be interesting to note, that it's a hindrance if it prevents you from dropping into concentration and meditation. That doesn't mean it's not true. And that could even be true with, everyone's favorite doubt, favorite, not favorite, which is self-doubt. Self-doubt is always a hindrance. It also could be true, right? Like when I say I, I have a really hard time with concentration, I have a really hard time focusing. It's, and so like, oh, I think this meditation thing, this is going to be a really hard road to hoe for me for a long time. That is the hindrance of doubt, particularly if it comes up during a meditation. I'm like, okay, thank you very much. I'm working, go away. At the same time, it's true. I understand my nervous system. I know my conditions. I know the attachment system and the developmental system and the cultural system and the social oppressive factors that lead to certain kinds of, nervous system manifestation. And it's just true. that my mind does what it does. And in a kind of empirical sense, I know this. And it's okay, right? And, you know, it's still a hindrance, even when it has aspects of truth to it. And so part of coming through the fetter of doubt, I think, is to, I don't want to use the word conquer because it's really not that kind of energy, but, understand with a very deep, both compassion and discernment, what's true in relation to the path, where I am in relation to it, and through all of that, to have come to the clarity that the path still is good and works. Like you have faith in the path. You can have faith in a path that you have not personally accomplished. Like one of the things that I have faith in is that I've met some very accomplished practitioners who are ethical and clear in their hearts and keep the precepts and are kind and who can, meditate like nobody's business, but who also, manifest the qualities of wisdom and compassion and discernment. And I've felt what it's like to be around them. And honestly, the reason that I'm sitting in this seat and still in this path, 30 years on from starting it, is more because of my faith in having met them than it is in my faith having arisen from seeing the radical changes in myself. Like I've definitely benefited from practice. I can feel that. But I'm very much of a sort of gradually maturing kind of practitioner rather than a dramatic breakthrough kind of practitioner. And so it's been easy for me to have doubt about my own capacity and, ability in practice. I stuck with it for 30 years because I could see how good it was in the people that were around me. Essentially, like the Sangha was just the best people I found in all my various travels and communities. I was like, these are the folks that feel good to be around. So I'm just going to keep being here, and the sense that practice has worked for me has been slow coming. It has come, but very gradually, very gradually. And I don't need to make some categorical claim that it's either stream entry or not, but I know for all of these first fetters, and we'll talk about the rites and rituals one next week, the third one, but for sakkāyadiṭṭhi and the wearing away of doubt, there really can be the sense that just as you immerse yourself in practice, in community, in just spiritual life, the life of the Dhamma, that there's just a growing body of, what the Diamond Sutra calls it is a body of merit. Right? Merit is a word for blessing. Punya is the Pali term. The good practice and good actions generate good kamma, they generate a body of merit. And part of what you find as you practice, and I know most of you for many years now, I've seen your practice, we've been together, you have bodies of merit that when your heart is clear enough, I know you can feel. And you can feel like this path is good, these people are good, this community is good, and so to give attention to this fetter of doubt can be in, it can come when you have a moment of gratitude for the community and the path and the teachers and the people around you on the path. It can come when you witness your own having shifted. Remember a few weeks ago, at some point in the last 6 months, we were talking about forgiveness and maturing and letting go. Part of it was in the Anapanasati class because we talked about the fourth tetrad that ends with the quality of letting go, but I've talked about it here as well, that letting go and forgiveness are not things that you can do. They're things that you recognize have happened. And so you can notice that you've let go of something that used to be really a fixation or a constriction in the heart. You don't really notice it while you're working on it. You notice it sometime after you've stopped working on it because you no longer need to. And you could think back and you, oh, that thing, wow, that just tormented me when I was 22 or whatever. And, you know, it's a non-issue now. And particularly if that was a view about who you are, you know, I'm unlovely or unlovable or unsmart or whatever, untalented, you know, incapable, all of the doubt stories. Maybe think back on one that tormented you when you were a teen or in your 20s or somewhere younger than you are, whoever you are listening to this in the mysterious future. If you are a teenager, think about something that tormented you when you were 5 or 7 or something. And if you're 7, get off YouTube and go play with Legos or something. Go beat up on your brother. But you know, we can all think back to some story that no longer has a grip on the heart. And so find those, feel how not just they've sort of naturally let go, but that your practice, the cultivating of the Dhamma, has worn it away. That seeing it again and again, that whatever kind of emotional repair work you've done, whatever kind of therapy work you've done, right, all part of the Dhamma, all part of this healing. You know, that your commitment to the precepts has worn away maybe an old habit of lying just a little bit, or, you know, keeping yourself comfortable by padding the truth. Notice anything like that, that it's been worn away and that your present state is happier or more at ease with the wearing away of that thing. And you're in the zone of that second fetter of really seeing like, oh, I don't have I don't have this doubt in the path or in myself because I've done it. I have done some of this. And so we wear away sakkāyadiṭṭhi by looking and looking and looking and looking. And the result of that looking is a kind of clear seeing. And when you see, or when you know, and you know, then the doubt begins to go. And so we can bring our attention to that again and again. So may our hearts be free of doubt in the path, free of doubt in ourselves. Never have doubt that your practice is, you know, not worthwhile or worth anything. You know, sometimes, you know, when drops of rainwater are starting to fill a large vessel, it doesn't look like much for a little while, but the vessel always fills eventually, and it gathers speed as it goes. So trust your practice, trust the path, trust yourself, your own goodness that brought you onto it. Right. So